Paris, March 2017. 4 highly talented media professionals came together to discuss the craft of voiceover. But first, they were asked to respond to the following statements. Voice talents should just speak and not have an opinion.
Yes.
That's not true. No.
When a voice records from their own home studio, retakes are often billed too high.
Yes.
Not always.
It depends because it varies on the client.
In 2017, studios are no longer essential for getting the best voice results.
Yes.
No.
After 100 takes, sometimes the first was the best.
Very, very true.
Yes. Not often. Yes.
Welcome to this panel discussion about voiceover direction, organized by voicebooking.com, an online voice agency in Amsterdam, but working all over Europe. And we're happy that 87 Second is hosting this discussion, so we're very grateful for the hospitality. And we have 4 panel people at the discussion, and I'll start with a lady who is, I'll introduce myself. I'm Machteld van der Graag. I used to be a copywriter. I'm now a voiceover, so I have also experience in both fields, in direction and in recording. And I'll introduce a colleague of mine, Sonia Johnson, an all-round French voiceover based in Paris with over 20 years of experience. And her career started out in radio as a radio journalist, and her voice can be heard on lots of French TV and radio channels. And you also work commercially for clients like KLM, Flisco, other big brands. And you also record for documentaries, and but you also do casting and directing of voices, so for commercial and educational projects. So Sonia Johnson. And I'll just go to a neighbor, also very experienced voiceover, Stéphane Cornicard, also known as the Voice Like Chocolate. .com. And you're a very talented multilingual language actor, working in 5 languages, I believe. French, English, German, and Spanish. And you're based in London.
Yes.
And you started at age 14, so long time ago, and like yesterday. But with extensive experience, both commercially, educationally, games. You do a lot of games.
Yes, I do.
And also you're a voice actor, but you also direct and cast and coach.
Yeah.
So we'll see all the aspects of voice direction. On my right is Gijs Vriesen, a very Dutch name. And you're a sound engineer with your own studio, a very unique studio because it's online. And you also freelance at sound studios.
Yeah.
And I also believe that you do live music. You mix live music
for radio stations.
For radio stations.
Very specific
area. Yes. But you have experience also with voices coming to your studio, or
no? My own studio is a mixed studio, but I also freelance for post-production studios. And as a sound engineer or sound designer, you also have to direct the voiceover sometimes.
Yes. Yeah.
So
okay.
Yeah.
Welcome.
Thank you.
And then our 4th member, Jack Chadwick, all the way from Australia. And you're now an illustrator at 87 Seconds, but in Australia you have worked for advertising agencies as a copywriter and project manager. And in that sense, you also directed voices for radio commercials, TV commercials, other productions. So that's another side of the scope. So we have everybody with a lot of experience from all sides, and I hope we're going to have a lively discussion. Let's first start with a brief historic overview of voiceover work, how it has evolved. How did it start out in your experience?
For my own experience, I started very young. I started theatre at 14. I did my first recording at 15. I directed my first piece at 16. I've seen a lot of changes from the time when we had to send cassette tapes, which were hand-labeled. We had to send them to agents. Then after that, it was the CDs, rewritable CDs that we used to post. And now everything is online, so it's evolved. And also the market for the home studio has grown tremendously in the past 10 years.
Yes.
And yeah, it's a very interesting, dynamic situation at the moment.
Yeah. What's your experience in the difference between, when everything was on tape and you had to go to the studio and now?
I think this is really as a voiceover we gain experience really, because now you go in studio, you work for hours and hours with other voice talents as well, and if you make a mistake, you slow down all the process, so you have to be very concentrated, precise. And without this experience, I think I would not have jumped in the train of online voice acting. So it really helped me to the fact that I started so young and that I was able to be in this world where you have to go to studio to record.
Yes, yeah. And did you start out digitally, or did you still work with the tapes?
Analog, yeah.
Oh, you started analog.
I started at the Dutch public radio, and when I started, they still had analog tape. But it was another job. I started doing post-production work a few years later.
Okay.
But that was digital, but online didn't exist back then. It was still a voiceover coming to your studio with a director. So the classic setup.
Yeah.
So,
Your experience, you mostly worked with actors coming to the studio, and could you imagine how it would work if you had to direct a voice remotely?
Remotely? I can picture it. I can imagine it being more difficult. I think I found it, even in my experience, I found it quite difficult even being face-to-face. And it was also really nice in that you could get immediate reaction from talking to a human being. I see the analogy maybe being like when you want to talk to a company online and you have to respond, to the FAQs on the website, and you rather just get off the person on the phone. And I feel like when you're in the studio with somebody, you get that person-to-person interaction, which can really add a lot more. I imagine it can be really much more difficult. In a purely online way.
Okay, you work both ways. Do you have preferences?
I like working both ways. That's my preference. My preference is the fact that I like to be able to not get dressed sometimes in the morning and just hobble into my studio and do my half an hour of voice and then get out. But also I got into this business through acting. So for me, people are important. And I don't think I would like it if I was working, 24/7 in my own studio. I think I'd go quite mad because it's a padded room. It's a bit like an asylum.
Isolation cell.
Yeah. It's very much like that. You don't hear any sound apart from your own breathing. So it's quite a lonely time if you only work from your own studio. So I like both. I really like both.
Okay. And nowadays the direction can be done in different ways. You can do it just by email or a voice sample or Skype. What's your preference in those kind of choices if you don't go to an actual studio?
I think I can be really flexible to have a clear instruction by email can be as fine as to have someone on the phone who can describe me the project. But again, I think that this is only because we have experience and we know when we receive a script, and if it's done for TV or for radio or broadcasted on a boat, we know which type of tone we need to have as soon as we receive a script. It feels natural. Now, I don't know if you start in the business, if you don't need really a clear voice instruction by phone or by Skype, or I think it could be very important.
Yeah. How do you feel about clients who kind of give a voice sample exactly, I want it like this?
That is really funny, I think, this story.
Because some voices don't like it like that. Sometimes I like it, but how do you feel?
I have a funny story that I have a sample that I recorded for a radio called RTL in France, and it was a brief for the Caraïbes, Paradise, Dreams, and it was fantastic with some bird songs and everything. And often clients choose this sample to sell a kitchen. And it's really complicated to do this exact tone of voice. So sometimes it can be funny, but sometimes yes, it can fit with a brief to just use the voice sample the client chose. Yeah.
Yes, because if you would have to hire a voice online, how would you brief a voice? Would you just write it down, or would you give an example from YouTube? Or
I would like to have a telephone / internet / in-person conversation. I think in-person would be the best way. That's the way that I worked in the past. We never had a recording studio at the agency. We would book time in a studio and meet the voiceover artist face to face, have a discussion about what we wanted, and because they were a professional, you don't need to give them much, but it's creating some sort of human connection, which I find was the best way to.
Okay, but now imagine the voice you really want lives all the way in London, and you don't have the time and the money to go over there. How would you brief Stefan?
I would avoid email at all costs. I would avoid email at all costs. Between languages, I find it can be difficult. I can express myself well in English, but if I'm speaking a different language, I don't know.
But say exactly for an English in the same language. Okay,
well, my hierarchy would be in person, on the phone, email.
Okay.
Last resort.
Okay. If we give the idea that can a voice deliver good work without personal contact, how do you feel?
I think it's possible. I don't think, personally, I don't need the voiceover to be there personally. I mean, it can work out much better. But sometimes it depends on the voiceover. If a voiceover is really experienced or you've worked with him or her in the past, you can send an email. They give you multiple takes. That's what I prefer, because I can even cut out single words and put it in another take to make it more match the music at that point or whatever it is. So my preference is to have at least a few takes if there was no contact when the voiceover recorded it. But even an audio connection, like Skype, just audio, works for me.
Okay.
Yeah, it takes some getting used to, especially if you work with somebody on the other side of the world and there's a bit of delay on the line. It's really, but even then, if you talk to each other for 15 minutes, you kind of get used to it.
Okay.
And then this barrier is,
And you stay online with that voice the whole recording, or?
Yeah, it depends. I like to work that way, if possible. If not, an email works fine if you know the voiceover. I think online works perfectly, especially if you know each other already, if you have met at one point.
Yeah.
And after that, you can just work online. And
yes, yeah. But for voices now, this home studio thing and working online is a new challenge, because there is a new role. I mean, Gijs is a sound engineer.
We become sound engineer.
Yes. Yeah. So how do you cope with that? Because you have to put several hats on. You're the sound engineer. You're also the go-between, and you're the voice.
It's more stressful, I think. It's more stressful. And I know that, for example, if I've got a Skype session and I know that the director is going to be online and I'm working as a voice, I find it a bit more I sort of dread the session a bit for the first 15, 20 minutes. I find it, before the session,
It's like someone is watching you.
Yes,
Yeah.
I'm worried that my expertise as a sound engineer is not necessarily going to be as good. Also, the thing is, for instance, I mean, when we talk about voiceover, there's so many different fields in voiceover. So talking about voiceover is a bit of a weird thing, because there's such a massive difference between corporate and dubbing and video games, animation,
business presentations.
All of these bring different skills.
Yeah, I mostly do commercials and corporate things, so other things might not work, but for me, if you do that kind of stuff, it does work.
Yeah.
But for sure, it's a
do.
new challenge for us as a voice talent that suddenly we need to edit a sound.
Yes.
And it was really comfortable back in the days just to have like a double, you know, sound engineer were just our twins in the session. It was fantastic. It was, you know, each of us was having an expertise, and now. Yeah. So that's a bit of a shame, but for my part, I just train. I mean, one of my best friends is a high sound engineer, and I learned from him.
Yes.
Days after days until I was able to edit properly.
Yeah.
But it's more work,
I remember my first home studio experience, it took me 3 hours to record 40 seconds. And then I recorded on the wrong side of the microphone. So that when the client called me and said, well, it sounds very far away, I said, well, just turn it up. I said, no, I can't. It's just, it was recorded too. Yeah, so, but 10 years later,
also,
it works.
It can interfere with the running of your session. Let's say you've got animation. You've been sent an Excel spreadsheet, which has, let's say, 100 lines. Most of the time, the writer is not going to think, oh, what is the loudest and what is the less loud? So they will put it in the order, sequential order, in which it comes in the story. But now the levels are going to be different. So that means that between each take, I have to sort of crank up the level, bring down the level, normalize, and the freedom to get into character or to really sort of have fun, which is why I went into this job in the first place. It becomes more stressful. It is doable, but it's a learning curve. And it's a learning curve not only for the voice, but it's a learning curve for everybody who is involved in it. I.e., you need to think in terms of volumes. Start with the lowest, go to the highest volume. You have to think about intensity. You've got to think about also, if you record 3 or 4 different voices from their own studio, how can you make sure that these will integrate in the proper way? Like I remember in a long time ago, we did a video game where we weren't told how far each actor was from the other. So some people were pitching it very far, and some people who were answering were pitching it very, very close. And of course, that creates a discrepancy in the final thing. And that's why I think having a director, even a remote director, who can listen in to the session, he's the one who will bring
the whole thing together,
homogeneity into the product.
And then the sound designer does his magic.
But the sound designer is also working after us. I think. We send our voice, and then they.
I always think they're magicians, because they're kind of, they can, as you say, cut out words and put all the levers. But you're right, as a voice director, if you have to cast several voices and get them online together, that's preparation.
It is preparation.
So as a voice director, you have to get all the information first
from the client.
Yes, so you can brief, because do some text, some scripts direct themselves, or is there always a need for some direction?
It depends on the. I'd say, for example, a corporate presentation. For instance, I'm not going to give any examples because I'm not allowed to, but let's say it's just a basic presentation of a product. I know that I want to bring in the fact that I've got a fairly deep voice, a voice that is authoritative, and a voice that is informative. But some scripts do not give you that information. Some scripts are obscure, or sometimes the director wants to go completely against the grain because the video edit is going to be completely different. I've just done a commercial which is for, I can't say what it's for, but it's a completely mad scene in a fashion show. But my voice is extremely smooth and clean. And now, if I'd
Like
seen
chocolate.
the video, well, if I'd seen the video, I would have probably gone for a completely different voice. But not having seen the video, but with the director telling me you need to be, we went against the video, which worked. It created something different. So sometimes the script gives you the answers, but sometimes it doesn't.
It doesn't.
I think the script is very, very important for us. It's essential. If we want to really do our job properly, we need to have really a script which is written to be spoken. And often copywriters forget that. And it happens quite a lot that we receive a script with a direction who doesn't fit the product or doesn't feel the...
I think you need more information if you work from your own studio, not just a script. You need
but we need a
context.
good script. I think a good script is like a dream. It's the words are flowing,
Does
flying,
that mean
it's
that you
fantastic.
see you have almost, you were saying that it's a learning curve before, but maybe it's also a teaching curve for you to explain to a scriptwriter, this is, your words are great here, but
in this context, it's not going to
As
work.
you spoken
It
words.
doesn't work this way. So it's a learning curve, is what you were saying before about the new technologies, but it's also a teaching curve when you're trying to explain your speciality, your practice to somebody who's thinking about the words and not necessarily about the sound.
And also online, if I can say, online, the online world is open to translation, and often the texts are translated, and this is also another way of having good or bad translation. And a good translation, you see it straight away.
This brings us to a good next point about the text. You as a copywriter, you've worked on your radio script, you've slaved away, it finally was approved by the client, by the legal, by everybody. And then you come in the studio and the voice says, no, I don't like that sentence, I'll do it differently. How do you react? How do you cope with that?
How you react and how you cope with it are two different matters. You react calm, and in your head you're, thinking about all of the emails you'll have to send later. But I actually think that it's a team effort in that way, because sometimes you have a voiceover. I've often found that the voiceover actors, they're not the problem. Sometimes it's the director who wants to change it. Where you have a scriptwriter who's invested their time and thought in speaking with the client and making a great script, and a director who may not have a full grasp or may have just come onto the project that day to do the record, comes in and says, this word doesn't work, we need to change that, change this, and the voiceover actor will do it perfectly because that's their job, but it's you need to be working as a team. And sometimes what you do is you say, okay, great, let's try it that way, and then we'll just do one version like it's written.
That's what I always do.
Yes. So you do two options.
Yes, if possible, if you can get it through, if it's working.
Another thing also to bear in mind is that we often work in localization, i.e. the product exists in another language, and our job is to make it relevant into the language that we do it in.
With the context, with the culture.
Exactly. But sometimes you will have a director, for example, I've worked often with Americans, and when I work in French, for instance, they tell me, I want bigger, I want sort of, but I say, but French is not as big as American. You cannot emphasize every single word the way you would in American. So you have to bear in mind, in that particular case, what is the market that whatever you're making, it has to fit in.
Yes.
And you can't just, and if sometimes I say, I'm sorry, I understand what you're saying, but the way to translate what you're trying to achieve in American is to let me do it my way in French or German.
But then it all comes down to trust again, that the client has to trust you. We have the same with Dutch and Flemish. In Flemish for Durex, it can be really nearly pornographic, but if you do the same tone of voice in Dutch, it sounds completely ridiculous. So these cultural differences have to be
and it
taken
happens
into
quite
account.
naturally. I think naturally the client who is not from this language is asking us,
Yeah.
how do we feel, how do we think that the script could fit with the market. So it happens, but it's an exchange.
Yeah.
So we arrive to the fact that a voice talent can't be only a voice.
Yeah. What I try to teach when I teach directing, I try to get the would-be directors to understand that giving adjectives and giving adverbs is actually a very good way of passing information. So a string of 3 adjectives or a string of 3 adverbs, and then after that, what is it actually that you're doing through that sentence? And putting an action verb behind each sentence actually helps. Like, for example, I present, I inform, I argue, I convince. And when you put these actions verb behind each sentence, then you achieve a much cleaner read, a read that is less cluttered.
Yeah.
It's more focused. It's more intent.
But you teach people how to be directors, but very often we have to work with people who are just trained on the job and who just grow with the work they do. Did you find sometimes you can't go any further because someone just can't explain or make clear what he or she wants?
I try not to take the shortcut, and I try to always arrive to the quality I believe is the right one. So I will fight to the end. Usually I'm a fighter.
I'm sure you win. Because some voices change the text and stuff, but there are also clients who say, well, a voiceover gets paid to make a badly written script good, because my legal department has approved this. So, and how do you cope with those situations?
Usually, that's my job. Try to fix it in the mix. Try to place the voiceover so it fits with the music, stuff like that. It can make a difference because you can make a space in between somewhere so both of the sentences come out naturally. But if this is not possible, there's not much you can do. It's just if legal wants it that way.
Yeah. And what happens when the client has given a clear brief and you've recorded it that way? The client wasn't there at the recording because it's policy of his business that he's not allowed to be there. And it comes back and it's not approved because he wants it completely different, but he can't really put it into words. How do you cope with a situation like that?
It depends what your email trail with the client looks like and who agreed to what on what date at what time. Sometimes you just have to re-record it. If a client's not happy, then you want to make a client happy sometimes, and that means you need to re-record it, and that's a fact of life sometimes.
Yeah, it happens.
And sometimes you have to take charge of the session as well. Sometimes you have to say, this is the way I work best. So you have to let me work the way I work best. Recently I was doing end tags for an advert, and he never let me do one complete sentence. He would interrupt in the middle of a sentence, or just let me do that sentence and then stop me. And I eventually said, look, you really need to let me do at least 3 takes of each sentence, because my first take is not going to be the best, my second take is going to be better, and my third take is going to be even better. So sometimes you have to establish the protocol, and you've got to say, this is the way I work best, and this is what I think will work best for your product at the end of the day. So sometimes you do have to take charge.
Because you have to deal with the insecurity sometimes of the clients, or even the voice directors at hand, who maybe through lack of experience can't really express how they want it.
Or sometimes even you get contradicting directions. Like when
there's seven people,
directed
seven
by
people in the
committee.
studio.
And everybody has to justify the sushi they've just ordered. So it's one of those things. You have to say, look, one person to talk to me. I can only hear you through the cans. So if you start all talking together, first of all, you're not all close to the mic. So I don't hear you all the same way. So really, it's best to have one person to articulate everything you need.
And to communicate with
and
others.
to communicate within yourselves, and then you tell me.
Yes.
But don't give me conflicting information, because then it's wishy-washy. It's neither here nor there.
But when that happens with an online recording, so you're in the privacy of your own booth, and
In my dressing gown.
yes, and you do it to the best of your ability, and then the client comes back, is not satisfied but not really clear. When do you feel that a retake should be for free, or when do you think you should charge for it? What's the how do you work with that?
My feeling is, if I've made a mistake, my retake should be free. If it's artistic direction or lack of artistic direction that made me go into a completely different
Tone of
route,
voice,
it is their problem, not mine. They weren't clear enough.
Can I just ask, what do you define as a mistake?
A mistake is, for example, I pronounced the word incorrectly.
So you can't make a mistake in your own interpretation? You kind of...
Well, maybe in tone of...
That is.
Can you only make a technical
There's no
mistake?
mistakes. There's no mistakes in that. It's just interpretation. That's not a mistake.
Yeah, but that's the problem.
But
When-
usually we have
it's
a
an-
guide
it's
of
an
the
interpretation.
pronunciation.
Okay, so only a technical fault would mean that you would re-record for free?
Yeah. Usually, if I've made a mistake, or if I've mispronounced a word, or if
And not
if they weren't very clear, for example, there's a Dutch word in the middle and I'm not sure how to pronounce it, and they haven't given me the tool to be able to do my job properly, then sometimes I will redo it for free, because I assume, okay, I should have gone to the dictionary, I should have checked.
But if they say, well, we would like it with more smile or more energy, and they thought they were clear about it in the briefing.
My policy is really to. I'm more concerned on script change, really, and the time where the retake is coming. A retake 2 weeks after a session, or this is really. I'm not really flexible for it.
Yeah.
But if we did a session, it went well, and then they want a little. I'm super flexible. But if they change the script, then it's it has to be.
Okay, but it's all about managing the client. You want that's a thin line you're walking, because you want to keep the client happy, but you don't want to.
and it would be the shame just for retake
but then
to
again-
spoil the whole work. So
That's another cap you're on, because it's client management and it's reputation management.
But how long is a piece of string? Because how many times are they going to come back and say, "Oh no, I'd like you to go like slightly more up at the end of that sentence," or can you put a slightly more stronger emphasis? Well, then, if you want that, and if you're that precise, log in.
Yeah, that's
Direct
exactly.
me.
If you want
Give
that-
me the direction. If you've just sent me a generic email with your script, and I've gone into a direction, it is your fault. It's
Yes.
not mine.
But do you record more versions of a more
Yes.
interpretation?
Usually, I give 3 versions.
Yeah, that's.
I give 3 versions, and if they're nice, I'll happy to do it for free. If they
That-
make
yeah.
me feel
If
that
they
it was
respect
my
you.
mistake, and they're barely polite in their emails and so on, then usually I charge.
And you don't want them back.
And you always want them back. You always want them back. But they have to learn as well. They have to learn that there are certain ways of doing things. And I would not advise a plasterer how to do his job. And therefore, if they haven't given me the tools to be able to do my job properly for what they want, it is their problem, not mine.
Yeah.
And I'm not losing sleep over it.
I think there is really 2 situations in your question. There is a session where we go to a studio, and then usually the collaboration, the human relationship is making the session perfect. When we leave, it's over. And then there is the online world where indeed there is some possible retakes, And really, for me, I'm choosing my client like they're choosing me. So my clients, I trust them and I trust their professionalism. And I know that if they come back to me, that they need to, and then that's it, we're fine. So I never have really this situation where I think, oh, maybe they will abuse, or because I chose my client because they're like me, and it's just working fine in this way.
And talking about clients, we there are several kinds of clients. There are, of course, the go-betweens, like the producers or the creatives of the agency. And then for commercial purposes, you have the real client, the brand.
Yes.
How do you feel about working directly with them? Does that work differently from, for instance, through an agency? Does it make you more nervous or more comfortable, or?
For me, it doesn't change a lot of the session by itself. I think as much as we have enough brief and as much as we understand where the product will be directed, where it will be broadcasted, and we understand the feel of what they want, it doesn't change because the voice agency will do this job for us, or we're going to do that directly with the brand. The brand will have also some people, behind the product to work with us. So as soon as it's good people behind the brief and good script, for me, it doesn't change a lot either way.
Okay. And with you, does that make a change if you work directly with?
No, it sometimes it's difficult because I've had people hiring me for a job, but you also are in contact with the agency behind that. So you work for the post-production company, but the agency is starting to contact you directly. And that's where I have to be careful, because you have to remember who gave you the job.
Yes.
And that's when working online happens sooner, I think.
Yeah.
So,
you have to be
it
diplomatic.
doesn't matter who I'm speaking to or where he or she is working for, he or she is working for, but I have to be clear who I am working for.
Yeah.
So that's the only difference for me.
Yeah.
I like, for example, voice booking in the sense that it is an online-based hiring agency, as it were, but there are various channels of communication that allow us to get the answers we need. Like they've started this sort of chat,
Yes.
which allows you to ask the question. Saying it's very simple. You just blah, blah, blah,
Yeah.
It's perfect.
how do you want this? That.
Yeah.
The answer comes directly. They trust us not to override them and to go directly to the client. And in my opinion, you can never have too much information. What you can have is too little information.
Exactly.
Yes.
But too much information is it's a joy, because it means you can create something more complex. You can layer things. You can have more than just one emphasis. You can have a whole cake of emphasis, and that's a joy. So the more channels of communications are open between the final client and myself, having the video, having a test sample, having
Pronunciation.
the other versions, etc.
Yes.
Or even seeing, in terms of advertising, when I had to take over the Boursin adverts, I made sure that I listened to all the previous Boursin adverts before me, so that I could create a continuity. And I was not going to go for something that was completely different. It allows you to create a continuity. So the more information, the better.
The better, yes. Now something completely different. Casting.
Yeah.
When you have written something and you cast, say, female voiceovers are better for business productions. Do you agree or do you not agree?
You agree?
No, I don't agree.
Are there set minds that you think when you write it, oh yes, I need a woman for this, or I need a man for this, or?
Well, clearly yes. Sometimes just obviously that is the case, but also I think it's more important that you have a little group of voiceover actors that you know well, and you think this personality will match with the personality of this script, not necessarily the gender of this person.
Okay, but you can't work with the same actors all the time for your production. So how many voices would you listen to do a proper casting? How many would you think, or would you present to your client to choose from?
I would present maybe 3 options at most, to a client, and I've listened to many, many more.
Okay, so you make a kind of
Like a
short list. You have
pre-selection,
you have a long list,
If you
and you
give too much, it
Especially
doesn't
if
work
the
on my
client
screen.
is not, maybe not in the, if it's a super technical client or something, a really specific business, they may not have a great expertise in choosing a voiceover. And so that's where the agency comes in as being a sort of intermediary of bringing their expertise to present a quality selection.
yeah. Say your client really wants to work with a famous Dutch voice, but you think that voice is not suited for the product. How would you go about a situation like that?
In that case, it would help if you are face to face, I think, because then you can talk and you can, it's easier to communicate. But I would try to persuade them to pick another voiceover, not the famous one. Sometimes there's too many things at stake for them, so they have to have a name. So there's not much you can do, but I always try to find if there's a possibility to let them know this might not be the right option.
Okay, and we see a lot of trends in voice acting. I mean, if we listen to commercials in the 50s or 60s, the whole diction, everything was different. How do you feel? What's the trend at the moment? Is it kind of natural, easygoing, or is it?
I think it depends on which country you're going for. Spain, I would say, is still very much a very overemphasized breed. If you listen to Spanish radio, it's hablan como esto y hablan como esto y para decir algo van a decir algo como esto. So it's very, very emphatic. If you go to France, France is much more sort of, we've left the 80s behind and we're no longer sort of hard sell. Whereas Americans, who incidentally are the only ones who seem to like the American accent, they tend to go for big sale as well. I know that in the UK, it's far more subdued, but there's a trend towards transatlantic neutral English. So it's not quite British English, it's not quite American English. It's sort of halfway in between.
It's kind of worldly English.
Yes,
yeah.
and it's a spoken English that you can't place, and a lot of companies love that.
Really?
Because
I hate that.
they're global companies, but they're global.
I hate that.
They're global.
As an English, I mean, honestly, I know that we have, as Australians, we have a very strong accent, but
But it's
that
very
sort of
charming.
Weird international school. Where did you grow up? English accent it's really
But it is a trend. I mean,
I think it's fake.
because you don't know where the person's from. I like to identify with the actor.
Yeah.
If I listen to a radio ad, it's like, I'm listening to a British guy, even if it's like the person's not British, they're putting on the accent. If I hear an accent and I'm like, I have no idea where this person is from.
But it's also very.
It disturbs me.
it is a big trend, though.
Yeah,
It
but
is,
it's also very cultural because in England, for instance, they, for a long time ago, they had newsreaders from Scotland or Wales or they had the regional accents. And whereas in the Netherlands, maybe we have one woman from Suriname, but all the rest is like the Oxford Dutch kind of thing.
Yeah. In France,
no, not a
it's
lot
the-
of accents at all.
it's the same. I mean, you don't hear.
French Parisians.
You don't-
It's just what
You don't have a South French
Not
accent
true, no.
reading the
Yeah.
news.
For them, I mean,
No.
it's a shame.
I don't think Parisians speak normal French anyway. Well, they don't. They don't speak what I call neutral French. They
Yeah, but
speak
that-
Parisian French.
Yeah, but that's what,
It's kind of the norm.
Yeah.
There's far less regional
Yes.
accents in France, which is a shame,
Yeah.
in my opinion, because it creates a lovely. I'd love to hear southern, and the only one that I can remember in France with a southern France accent was Ducrot. Ducrot is des carcasses, but that's that's the only one, and it was so focused that it became almost a laughing stock.
Yes.
It was okay if you were Parisian. Excuse me, I'm from Normandy. But if it was okay to laugh about people's accents,
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think we need more diversity.
Yes, yeah. Let's now talk about money. Because the norm is still that for commercials, people go to a sound studio and they think it's worth the money to do that. Do you think that'll ever go online?
Yes, because I never used to think a lot of things that are now every day. I never used to think I would have the internet in my pocket on my phone, but now I do. So yes, eventually, but for now, I still, in my experience, I really liked knowing that you go to the studio and you got it. And if that takes, you can get that in half an hour with a great director and a great sound engineer and a great voice actor, and it's done, and you pay for it, but it's good.
Yeah.
And I think paying for quality is sometimes, it's worth it.
Yeah. And there's another money aspect is the buyout. It used to be that the biggest buyout was for television, it still is. But do you think, for instance, a pre-roll online commercial that is kind of worldly now should be paid more for than a TV commercial that's only broadcast in one country? How do you feel? Yes.
Definitely. I mean, you've got to think about it as how many people are going to be listening to your ad. Therefore, how much is the ad worth to the people who are producing it? I mean, basically, they want as many people to listen to it as possible. So if my ad is only in the UK, then I expect it to be reflected in the price that I get paid. If it's a worldwide ad, I expected it to be reflected because the added value that I bring to the advertising agency is different.
But is it like that in your experience?
Yes.
Yeah?
Now, I've just done 2 commercials for Babel, which were worldwide, and
only
I
online.
did also for Google, and it was 3 years buyout, and it was online.
yes.
So for big brands, it works.
Yeah, okay. But I get the feeling still people see TV as expensive, and now this is just for online.
Yeah.
Well,
TV,
online,
radio, it's TV, radio, and online,
Yeah.
but big brands online are much
It's
more
shifting.
TV commercials.
Yeah. And with the YouTube canals growing and I mean, young people watch much more stuff online now.
Yes.
So
yeah, sure.
I think
for me,
that
the feeds are the same, whatever I mix. But for you, it's different. So
Yes.
yeah.
I was wondering if it's already changed because online is.
It depends.
But
on-
there's still every time you ask for it, there's discussion.
yeah.
Right.
It's never
Fixed.
it's never
Unless
fixed.
you've got a system like the UK, which uses TVRs, and the TVRs basically look at when the commercial is being aired and how
How
many,
long,
on average, people are listening to it, and then they apply a multiplicator. So you've got your basic studio fee, and they multiply the basic studio fee by the number of people who are watching at any particular time that the advert is slotted.
But is that calculated afterwards?
No, it's calculated. They buy
For the
for
airtime.
example, for 300 TVRs. So they know that over the course of a year, they will place their ad in such place.
Is England the only country that works like
no,
that?
America is the same. It's only the rest of Europe that seems to be working on a buyout system. I think the buyout system
Well,
is a bit,
like this kind of buyout system, because that's a buyout system as well, but it's calculated, it's based on views
exactly.
and yes.
It's actually accurate.
Yes.
As opposed to a blank buyout where, in my opinion, it's almost like signing a blank check.
Yeah,
Because
especially now with online.
Once
Online
I've said
is
that, they can do whatever they want with it.
yes, because on TV the buyout is usually a year or something,
Yeah,
but now
6
with
months or 3
internet
months, yeah.
and online it's just forever.
Yes.
Yeah.
But then now
Yeah.
you can calculate the buyout for forever. I mean, I renounce more or less. I don't know, you can calculate that. I mean, it would be a legal administration which is enormous,
Because-
which is worldwide, which is... I
Yeah.
mean, how can you do that?
Usually it goes between 500% to 1,000% of the BSF, in my experience, for when you sell the rights for online and online only. But it's between 500 and 1,000 of the BSF percent.
Okay, and well, we've seen a lot of changes over the years, and recently we have seen software which can place a word which wasn't pronounced by the person into a recording. Do you think what's going to be the next step? Are we going to be out of work, or are we just going to be sampled?
Well, I heard this thing. I saw the demo. I was really blown away by it. It's extremely accurate.
I still don't believe it, but
No,
yeah,
but still,
it's true.
The person to speak, I thought it was 20 minutes of
Yeah.
gibberish, so they can glue all the
Sounds together.
sounds together, yeah, and
Yeah.
make another word of that.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was scary how well.
But does it sound really human?
Yes.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
It was actually.
You have to. It's online, and it's a demo at.
Adobe made it, I think.
Yeah. And it's just like photoshopping
Yeah.
with
And
a
it's
voice.
still not made out there, but
No.
it's really.
It was a
I
good
don't
job.
know, it's- Yeah.
Yes.
I gave my voice to several programs like that. And basically you speak, they record you, they give you a certain amount of words to say, which encompass pretty much the whole.
The worst sessions, I hate it.
No, it was fun for
Like a
me.
navigation
So,
program.
yeah.
Turn right.
It's so full.
Yeah, but it's part of the job. It's you take the challenges that
Yeah,
come.
yeah.
You know, like concatenation. Concatenation was awful at the beginning. Concatenation being placing like 1, 2, 3 in the middle of a sentence. You have 3 messages.
Yes.
So before it used to be absolutely awful, but now it's getting to work, and there is work for actors doing that. So I mean,
You don't mind?
as long as they pay me to do a job, I'm.
Because it's the best job there is, right?
It's the best job there is.
Yes.
I go to Sainsbury's or to my local shop and I hear myself.
Yes. I love that, being in the car with my boys and then, oh, it's mummy on the radio. Okay. So as a conclusion, we can say that really from going from analog to digital has really revolutionized our world, and it hasn't stopped yet. So
Just begun.
yeah, we haven't seen the end of it, and we have to stay ahead of the game. Then I'd like to thank you on behalf of 87 Seconds and voicebooking.com for attending this discussion. Thank you, Jack, Gijs, Stefan,
Thank you.
and Sonia.
Thank you very much.
And thank you for listening. Thank you.